So in this lecture, I want to start with the fact that we're presented with two problems with the Epic of Gilgamesh. The first problem is the problem of context. As the oldest human narrative ever written, it's very difficult to bridge the gap between the 21st century and 2800 BCE. We don't know everything about ancient Sumerian culture, for example, that readers of the text would have understood. We don't know everything about the legends, the lives, what the kings and heroes meant to the people. And we're also faced with the problem of form. The text comes to us in broken tablets, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the cuneiform tablet and how what we're given is a narrative that is always fragmented, that is always wearing its brokenness on the surface of its monumental record. And I think that's important to understanding some of the themes of the epic. So let's start with a definition of what an epic is. The word epic comes from the Greek, meaning word, story, or poem, but a more formal definition would be a long poem commonly thought of as the song of a people and or a culture. So epics are typically derived from ancient and oral tradition. They typically narrate the deeds and adventures of a heroic or a legendary figure, or in many cases, the history of a nation. In the case of Gilgamesh, the narrative is divided loosely into a series of connected episodes, but taken together, it has the feel of an epic in the respect that it tells the adventures of Gilgamesh, a legendary figure from ancient Sumeria, and his relationship to themes that I've already mentioned. Some of the great epics in Western civilization, just so that you can contextualize Gilgamesh, are things like Homer's The Iliad, or the Odyssey as well by Homer, Virgil's The Aeneid, and of course John Milton's Paradise Lost. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the form of the epic. It's a huge narrative, a huge epic about grand human themes, and it comes to us in very, very small tablets. These tablets can actually fit in the palm of your hand, if you believe it or not. And in another lecture, I'll speak a little bit more about the history of these tablets and the form that they take. But the reason why this is important is because it's important to make a distinction between the narrative and the story on the one hand, which has lots of human themes that we're going to be talking about, and the media and form in which the narrative is inscribed. In a very real sense, what we have in the epic is not just the story of Gilgamesh, in other words, but the embodied memory of Gilgamesh. It's a monument that has gained and acquired its own immortality through time. It's a sign of civilization, a sign of culture, some of the things that were valued in ancient Sumeria, as we're going to see shortly. So part of the story of Gilgamesh is indeed the story of the tablets, and that's why I've devoted another lecture to the history of the tablets. But in this case, I just want to quickly draw the distinction between the content, which involves the narrative itself, the text, the ideas embedded in the text, the themes embedded in the narrative, and the story. And on the other hand, and we can make this division with all of world literature, we have the form, how something is said. Does it take the form of poetry, a novel, an autobiography, a fragmented memoir? There are a variety of different forms, and you're being exposed to the diversity of forms in world literature in this class. So in the case of Gilgamesh, we have an epic poem that is inscribed on a series of broken tablets in cuneiform. It's episodic and broken. And one of the signs of that episodic nature are these question marks and ellipses that you'll constantly see. And brought together, they form an overall narrative and an overall quest. So one thing you'll notice is the question marks and the ellipses, and it's important to notice the difference between those. So the ellipses, when you get 3 dots in a row, those indicate when a word or a line is missing. It hasn't survived historical time. The fragment has been broken off at that point. In many instances, however, the missing lines can be restored based upon scholars excavating other tablets and noticing parallels between another tablet and the tablet with the missing fragment. The question marks, on the other hand, indicate places where the restoration of a word is not entirely certain, but the translator and scholars have put it there to reconstruct the text based upon the context around it in ways that they think make the most sense. Okay, so that's a distinction that you want to be aware of as you continue to read the epic.